Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name is Suj.
And my name is James.
And quite possibly one of the more anticipated shows of the season, James. I think based on both the pre-reaction when we said, obviously, we are doing a chip special, and the number of questions that have been fired in on Twitter, people are all going crazy about the chips at the moment or wondering what to do.
Yep, this happens. I think where we're at in terms of podcasts generally is we try and do one in the summer to cover what the outlook of the season will look like. And invariably this podcast that we're doing today kind of normally comes around in January. I think once FA Cup third round's gone, then we can start painting the idea of a picture. Correct. This year is obviously very, very different. And I suspect this won't be the last chip podcast that we do this season. I suspect we might be doing another one in a month, actually, quite soon.
Well, people will know you and me like a bit of chips. So
Love
no
chips.
Problem with that.
Yep.
Triple cooked, crunchy, lovely,
yep.
jubbly.
Double
chips
chin,
galore.
Big belly, mayo, ketchup, all that stuff. Got to be salt and vinegar. None of this curry sauce or any of that stuff. Gravy, northern boys. Yeah, but we do love chips. I'm not going to lie about it. And I love FPL chips.
Yes.
As someone who's a strategist and a planner, planning what to do with chips is quite important to me. I am the poor man's Ben Crellin. I have no problem with that. If you don't know who Ben Crellin is, please get on Twitter and look through his timeline and give him a follow, because he's the god of the planning this sort of stuff. And a lot of the ideas that we're going to talk about today obviously come from a lot of Ben's theories as well as some other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where should we start?
So we've had a number of questions in on Twitter and what have you. I think a little bit of clarity just on the fixtures. So here we're talking about the wildcard free hit bench boost, and for a few people they're considering triple captain in game week 19 as well. A bit of history for those that don't know, but many probably do. Because of the lack of fans in stadiums, the Premier League had to appease the TV companies by giving them more televised fixtures. I mean, that's kind of gone out the window because every game is televised now. However, it was pre-agreed before the season started that some of the game week 18 fixtures would move into game week 19 in the midweek, so that the TV companies had additional fixtures to televise. And that then obviously meant that we'd have a blank game week in 18 with only half the teams playing, and a double game week in 19 where half the teams had two games. Throw into that, obviously now we've had a couple of teams four teams started the season late, and we've had one other postponement as well with the Villa-Newcastle game. So on top of this jiggery pokery of only 5 matches in 18, 15 matches in game week 19, one of the things on people's minds is, what about the other 3 fixtures? So if we can shed some light on what's happening with those, I think that would be a good start point, James.
Okay, cool. So 3 games we're unaware of at the moment are obviously the postponed game week 1 fixtures, Burnley versus Manchester United and Manchester City versus Aston Villa. And obviously we had the Aston Villa versus Newcastle postponement, I think from game week 11 from memory. Where will they go? That's a number one question. So to timestamp this, and I think this pod will last for a lot of the week, Manchester United have a Carabao Cup final at Everton on Wednesday. And that can be pivotal to what happens, particularly to their fixture at Burnley. I don't think that the Premier League or the TV companies want any further fixtures in 18 or 19. One of the ideas between this split was to be able to show 10 live games across 6 days at different times. So there's no 2 games at 8:15. Even if you look through 18 and 19, there's a game at 6 o'clock, there's a game at 8:15. There's no doubling up of 2 games at the same time. Should another game go in there, that's definitely going to happen. One of the reasons for that is Burnley and Manchester United, if it goes into blank or double, can only now go into the blank, and it would have to be on the Wednesday night. So that means 2 games at the same time. Probably not ideal when you've got Tottenham and Manchester City are the 2 other teams playing that way, certainly from a TV exposure perspective.
Sure.
Manchester City and Aston Villa could go into the double game week in theory on Wednesday the 20th, I believe. I don't think either of these 2 scenarios are likely to happen. I think if that was the case, they would have already dropped it in there. Game week 17 is still a potential double for Burnley and Manchester United, in my opinion. Manchester City and Aston Villa can't go in there. That's because Manchester City play in the Premier League on the Sunday before that midweek, and Aston Villa's FA Cup tie with Liverpool has been arranged for the Friday night. So that would mean one of those teams would have to play 2 times in 3 days. I can already feel a lot of people in the back of my neck saying, yeah, but there's a lot of people doing that next week, James.
Sure. Christmas is always...
Christmas is different, right?
Well, we know what we're getting into with Christmas.
We may have this scenario, particularly for Manchester United, where at some point it may have to happen, but it's only going to happen if it has to happen. The reason Burnley and United, I think, could get forced into 17 still is if United lose to Everton in the Carabao Cup quarterfinals, that midweek is the Carabao Cup semi-finals. It's fairly reasonable at the moment that you can have one Carabao Cup semi-final on the Tuesday, one on the Thursday, Burnley Manchester United goes on the Wednesday as a Premier League game, and you've still got one game every night during that midweek. And I think that would still appeal to the TV companies. And it's a fear to get the Burnley Manchester United game rearranged because United are now in the Europa League. United dropping into the Europa League causes a massive headache. Essentially, should United get to Carabao Cup final, FA Cup final, and Europa League semi-final, which all seems really unlikely, but it's possible, there are not enough midweeks for Manchester United to rearrange all their games. Now, literally now, because that Burnley fixture hasn't been played. Never mind, oh my God, heaven forbid, should they get a COVID case or something like that and lose a couple of games, then we're in really uncharted territory in terms of what can happen. So if United beat Everton, that rules out Burnley Manchester United in game week 17 because United will have the Carabao Cup semi-final. And then I think you're very unlikely for that game to be played in January. I think you're looking at February and beyond. The issue for rearranging that fixture to complicate things matter because they're in Europa League, of course, is you can't book it on another midweek night, right? With the Europa League, you're Sunday, Thursday. There's not really a way around it. Unless, like I said, the Premier League want to force that on a Tuesday night, for example, and United play 3 games in 5 days. But I think, as I said, we will only get to that scenario if that's something that has to happen. It's unlikely that it has to happen. So I wouldn't be surprised now if Burnley and Manchester United isn't played till game week 37. Honestly, it could be in game week 17. It could be ages away. Manchester City and Villa is easier. The reason it's easier is because City are in the Champions League.
Yep. So
the last 32 of the Champions League is staggered over 4 match days, if you will. So there are 2-3 weeks for Manchester City. So my instinct right now is Man City and Villa is highly likely to be on February the 17th, which I think gives City a double of Tottenham and Aston Villa, potentially, should that happen. And I think with fans not in the stadium, we're certainly not going to have full capacity come the 17th of February. City and Villa could be at 6 o'clock on the Wednesday, and it doesn't interfere with the Champions League game that night. The reason I think that particular date is the most likely, there isn't even an English team playing in Europe that night. So I think that's the most likely. The other game, Villa-Newcastle, could be any time. Again, I think that January is extremely unlikely for it to be arranged. You could look at it now and say, well, if Newcastle lose to Brentford, that could also be Carabao Cup semi-final night. You're right, it could be. But because neither side are in Europe, essentially, it could be 6 o'clock on a midweek, any night it likes, or even further afield, clashes with a Champions League night, for example. If we're at full stadiums, remember Brighton-Cardiff a few years back, played on a midweek night, clashed with Champions League, it wasn't televised. If we had full stadiums, wouldn't even need to be televised. And again, I think from Villa's perspective, they're not going to be nagging, even though they've got 2 games that need to rearrange, they're not going to be nagging to have the Newcastle game rearranged, I don't think. Why would you? When potentially in 3 months, you might be able to get 15, 20,000 in the ground from that perspective. Yeah. So Villa-Newcastle, there's no rush. I don't think it will get rearranged. In short, I don't think that Villa-Newcastle will happen anytime soon. City-Villa, I think, is likely to be in February. Burnley-Manchester United is the one to keep a really, really close eye on. Now, in terms of when we'd get an announcement for that, in theory, it could be as early as 10 o'clock on Wednesday night Thursday is Christmas Eve. I wouldn't rule out an announcement. Saturday, Sunday, wouldn't rule it out. Monday, wouldn't rule it out. I think if we go beyond Monday, with the game only likely to be 9 days later, it's beginning to become unlikely. It's only one game to rearrange. It's not moving 4 or 5 fixtures. So I think for those who are looking to wildcard in game week 16, i.e. pre-game week 16, you should know whether or not it's going to happen in game week 17 or not. Of course, if United win, it's off the table. And therefore, I think what we're looking at from blanks and doubles, as it is now, is what it will be.
Is what we're going to get. The only opportunity there would be a double for United in 17 and 19, and a double for Burnley in 17 and 19 that might affect our thoughts. Having
Correct.
said that, in 17, Manchester United have Aston Villa. Their double is Liverpool away, but then they do have Fulham as well. So United definitely on the radar in terms of, based on their recent performances as well, they'd be crazy not to be on the radar.
If you're wildcarding, you know that fixture is going to happen, and you're intending to free hit in 18. The idea that you've got a Manchester United double either side, and you free hit when they're not playing in the middle, you're going to try and force free in, aren't you? Essentially, you'd be looking at United playing Villa at home, Burnley away, attractive, and then Liverpool away, Fulham away. All right, Liverpool, not great, but the Fulham fixture still appeals, obviously, doesn't it?
Correct.
And also, to land on the other side of that, they play Sheffield United at home in game week 20. So you'd land nicely off of it as well.
So that's a bit of a rundown on the missing fixtures at the moment as it stands, with the 3 that haven't been arranged yet. In terms of one of the other big topics that came out in the Twitter questions, it was all around, is now the best time? Like, is this strategy for people that definitely have their first wildcard, but even for people that don't, free hitting in 18 and bench boosting in 19, are there going to be any other better opportunities to do it? Even people that don't have their first wildcard, who want to bench boost in game week 19, still have 4 or 5 weeks, and if you wanted to take a couple of hits to maneuver your squad to get in a healthy position to have 11, 12 double game week players in 19, and you can still free hit in 18. And there's going to be very, very few people, I think, that have spanked their free hit chip so far. So in answer to that question, what are the other opportunities later in the season that could crop up that might make people think, you know what, I'm just going to let this one go?
Yep, understood. So free hit, to start with, that is something either you can use aggressively or defensively, essentially.
Yep.
So use it very aggressively in a double game week, for example, or quite commonly, say game week 18 as an example, you're using it to fill gaps, plug holes, basically. You're not expecting the biggest score from that week, particularly there's only 5 fixtures. But if you take my example, where I'm likely to use it in game week 18 and probably not have any of those players left in game week 19, for example, then if I can get 40 points out of it, even, that's 40 points I wouldn't have had. So that's, I don't think we're looking at that enough, potentially. I would want 16 points extra out of a bench boost, an extra 12 or 13 points out of a triple captain. That free hit, if that plugs me 40 points over a hole and leaves me with a shed load of doublers for 19, great. But I get it. A lot of people are saying, is this the best opportunity? So what can cause future blanks in the future, essentially, is one of the things we need to clarify. So game week 26 is when the Carabao Cup final is scheduled to happen. The midweek afterwards is completely free. Game week 29 is FA Cup quarterfinals. That's the other week that really can cause a lot of blanks. We could, in theory, have only 4 teams play. In theory, we could have, in theory, everyone could play. If we have a quarterfinal lineup of 8 championship teams, we know that's not going to happen.
Not likely. Yeah.
But it's unknown. I think on average, Ben Crellin was saying ordinarily you get 5 blanks there. So from that perspective, you look at 29, you look at 18 and go, okay, well, it's average 5 blanks. So 29 looks the same maybe as 18. And that's one of the things people are thinking in their mind. The issue with 29 particularly is there isn't a midweek after to really drop the fixtures in. So what we think is going to happen, I'll talk about this a bit more in a sec, is the idea that a lot of fixtures are going to be brought forward to game week 26 rather than backwards. So the games will actually be brought forward. I don't think in all cases that's going to happen. I'll come back to that.
Will we have enough knowledge time-wise for that to happen safely?
To prep, as in build a
3
team
weeks.
to game week 29?
No, I mean more from the FA's point of Premier League's point of view. They will know who needs to have their 29 fixture moved in enough time to get it into 26, because that's a 4 or 5 week gap.
Yeah.
So the FA Cup last 32 or whatever, it'll be fourth round. Will have
so
been
the FA Cup fifth round is the midweek between game weeks 23 and 24. Date-wise, that's week commencing 8th of February.
So they'd have to act within a week almost to get them into 26.
Well, you'd have to act quite quickly. But obviously, again, if we haven't got fans, this is less of a problem, right?
Yeah. Let's be real. We're, based on what's going on right now, fans, it's going to be...
26th is week commencing 27th of February. So a little bit of time. We're talking just over 2 weeks. I think it's enough time.
Okay.
In these circumstances, in this year, there's enough time. And a lot of these, if you've got teams that take United as the ultimate example, because they've got potentially the biggest fixture headache at the moment, they get to the FA Cup quarterfinals and have got to the Carabao Cup final, they've definitely got obviously a midweek fixture going in game week 26. But guess what? Because they're in the Carabao Cup final, it's still only a single game week.
Right.
This is part of the thing to manage and understand. Go, oh, okay, United will definitely have a midweek fixture then, but actually it will still be a single.
Yeah.
Game week 32 and 37 are also potentially interesting. So 32 is when the FA Cup semi-finals are. Now, immediately after that, the midweek is open. So that's a possibility. But again, you would think FA Cup semi-final postponements literally just go into the midweek afterwards. It could just be a normal game week, but just stretched over 5 or 6 days.
Right.
Game week 37 is the FA Cup final this year. So that's going to, again, as long as we've got a Premier League team in there, going to cause 0, 1 or 2 postponements. You would think on that stage that fixture definitely gets played in 37. So again, you're just looking at a single game week. You can't bring the 37 fixture forward to 32 to that midweek because you don't know who's going to win the FA Cup semi-finals, which is that week. That makes sense?
Yeah, of course it does.
Yeah. So whatever is postponed on the weekend of 37 is still just going to stay in that midweek. 26 is the one that's causing the real headache. And the idea of, could that be a bigger and better week to bench boost than game week 19? The short of it is, don't know. I think it's possible that it could have 5 or 6 doubles. I think it's more likely that we'll probably have about 3. When I say 3 doubles, I mean 6 teams, roughly. And part of that is the complex that obviously the Carabao Cup final is going to get postponed. So, give you an example. Let's say that Manchester United and Arsenal is the Carabao Cup final. Okay. Now, you might think, don't know about that at the moment. Manchester City are going to be one of the teams. Okay. Is it that improbable at the moment that Arsenal beat Man City? They might be a heavily rotated team. They often don't play anywhere near their strongest team till they get to the semi-final, but obviously their squad depth is so big, invariably they keep going through. United can obviously bring in people like Mason Greenwood, Van der Beek in midweek, even kind of still rotate and potentially might still beat Everton. So then, look, they might be looking at semi-final opponents after that, Stoke and Brentford, in which case then you'd make that the favourite to be the final, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
The awkwardness of those two particularly is, United obviously still in that situation of trying to catch up fixtures. They play Chelsea in game week 26 away. Arsenal play Leicester. The reason I highlight these two particular cases is for a very simple reason. If those 2 games get postponed, they're likely to stay in 26, in my opinion. And the simple reason for that is Chelsea and Leicester are still in Europe as well. So when do you begin those fixtures would have to become the priority. So suddenly then you're looking at Chelsea United, Leicester, Arsenal. That's only a single game week in 26. Four of the best teams. I don't care what anybody's saying about Arsenal at the moment. When it comes around for a double game week, people like Aubameyang begin annoying you in your head, honestly.
Yep.
So that leaves City, Liverpool, Tottenham potentially still. Yeah, great. I mean, City and Tottenham are also still in the Carabao Cup. And also, obviously, all three of those clubs also still have the headache of being in Europe. The point is, there is no guarantee that whoever has an FA Cup quarter-final postponement in game week 29, that the fixture gets brought forward. It can't be guaranteed. In the case of those two fixtures that I highlight particularly, I think they just stay in there. Those are the fixtures that will go into the midweek. They have to be the priority. And therefore, it just becomes a single for all those teams. And that's where it's not straightforward to say, oh, there'll be 5 postponements in 29, they'll all go into 26. It's not that straightforward. And we can't, look, this is new for all of us this season. We can't guess what's going to happen. Genuinely can't.
I think challenge, obviously, I think it's highly unlikely that we get to that point without at least one other postponement or something having to happen within the fixtures because of how crazy things are right now. Where we started this specific point is like it's predominantly for people that don't have their first wild card are thinking, should I hold back my second wild card for 26 and 29 because I don't want to burn it so early in the second half of the season just for this game week 19. And it kind of sounds to me like if the alternative is to take just 1 or 2 hits to get yourself set up for 19 and save that wild card for 26, it might be worth it. But you might end up taking 3 or 4 hits right now, and then suddenly, 12, 16-point hit ends up becoming completely not worth it because you didn't get the fixtures further down the road.
I also think 37, which at the moment on paper you look at it and go, right, FA Cup final postponement, that will get played in the midweek afterwards. It's just a normal game week. And that is possible, that there'll be no doubles at all. That's a possibility. I think we'll land with a few in there. And I also think, for those who want to get excited about the triple captaincy, there is small, I'm talking 2-3% possibility, that when it comes round, someone might get forced into a treble.
Game week 37 is also known as the Harry Kane game week.
I think where that scenario would potentially happen is if United went out, let's say, in the semi-finals of the Europa, maybe even the quarterfinals, and lost in, say, the FA Cup semi-finals, I think that becomes a serious possibility. One of the reasons for that is the midweek before game week 37 begins, i.e. the FA Cup final weekend, is a full set of Premier League fixtures. So 36 run through to 38. Is it possible that a team could play Tuesday in game week 36, Friday, Monday, Thursday in 37, game week 38 we know will be a Sunday. So only 3-day gaps then. Is that a possibility? And that's why I feel like things like Villa Newcastle, it will just keep getting pushed back. I think the TV companies will be thinking, I want the drama at the end. Let me hold as many. And you might think now, Villa Newcastle. But what if we get there and Villa have put a run together and they got a game in hand that would take them 5th and give them a chance of Champions League on the final day? Unlikely, I know. Newcastle, could they get dragged back into trouble? Yeah, of course they could, for example. So if the TV companies can try and hold some drama back on these games, they will. Now, obviously, in that case, if, say, Villa Newcastle was to be, I don't know, let's just say the FA Cup final, for example, just play Villa Newcastle in game week 35. Doesn't matter because of Europe, right? Yeah. So I think the TV companies will be wanting to hold a few back. Now, to relate that, obviously in game week 29 itself, there are a number of fixtures that don't feature European teams that obviously could be postponed. Brighton Newcastle, Fulham v Leeds, Sheffield United versus Villa, West Brom versus Everton. I think they're the 4. And that's, of course, assuming that all the European teams are still in Europe as well, right? By that point, we might think, some of them are going to be out. Let's be honest. Yeah. It would be amazing if we get round to 20th of March and all 7 teams are still in Europe. I'd say that's probably unlikely at the moment, actually, looking at some of the draws. But that's the worst case. You're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 fixtures that don't involve European teams. If those teams are playing in the FA Cup quarterfinals, let's take Brighton as an example, okay? Brighton play Newcastle in game week 29. So looking at them, you might think, well, if that gets postponed and that gets brought into game week 26, Brighton could have a double of West Brom and Newcastle. Oh, that's nice. I get a few cheapies in there. Tariq Lamptey, maybe I go for Morpay up front. I could leave Basuma on the bench. He can be part of the bench boost. I get all that. That's ideal. I think the point is we can't guarantee even for fixtures like that. Why bring it forward? Why not just play it randomly in game week 33 or 34 and not have it clash with other more high-profile Premier League games that will have to happen in 26? And again, it's more TV exposure potentially. If you put it at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday in game week 33, it's going to get more TV viewers than if it clashes with Liverpool and Chelsea, for example, isn't it?
Of course, yeah.
Chelsea particularly is also an interesting problem because obviously I said about prioritizing games to go into 26 where you've got 2 European teams meeting. Chelsea play United in 26. They also play Liverpool in 29. So take that as an example. Let's say Manchester United get to the Carabao Cup final and Chelsea get to the and Liverpool get to the FA Cup quarterfinal, which, to be honest, Liverpool may well throw it away. I get that, right? But Chelsea could get there. Quite conceivably, one of them could get to an FA Cup quarterfinal. Which game then plays in 26? Chelsea v United rearranged from 26, or Liverpool v Chelsea from the FA Cup quarterfinals gets brought forward? Can't put them both in that midweek, for example, right? So it could land that it's still just a single game week for many of these teams. So there is so much unpredictability about how big or small game week 26 will be. I think it could be as low as maybe even only 2 doubles. I think Ben Crelling's worked out that three games to double, so 13 fixtures for the game week, is probably the most likely. Could it be 15 or 16? In theory, yes, but I think because of the Carabao Cup final being that weekend, that just complicates it. It's so unlikely to be that big because of the Carabao Cup final. So, therefore, is 19 likely to be the biggest double game week? Yes. Right. Is it the best for everybody? No, not necessarily. But is it likely to be the biggest game week of the season? Most likely.
Right. And so that kind of gives people an answer to the question around whether or not there is going to be opportunity further in the season. There certainly will, but it might not be as big as this. But depending on your circumstance, you might look at this and say the amount of work to maneuver and change things around is just too much to really care. I'll work my way through this, roll the dice and see what happens further down the road, especially those without the first wild card. In terms of specific strategies for this period that we're about to go into, one of the things that people did ask us a lot about on Twitter was around how many single game week players to have, how many double game week players to have, whether it's worth it or not to really go on an all-in strategy with the free hit and the bench boost double game week teams. For example, City and Spurs have decent fixtures in game week 19 and play in 18, but don't have the double in 19, and so on and so on. I think it's really important to point out that obviously we don't know everybody's individual teams, right? It's not the RMT show, unfortunately, so we can't really go into
We ain't
detail.
never doing an RMT show.
No, and people have to kind of make their own calls. At the end of the day, you've got to manage your own team here, right? We can only lay the evidence and give you an opinion on the lay of the land. You've then got to pick your players in the same way that you've just heard James give a good lay of the land for what could happen in 26, 29. Now you've got to take that information and decide, do I want to roll the dice and wait, or do I want to just get it done with and play these chips now? I would say the majority of managers have used their first wild card, but perhaps not the majority of engaged managers who listen to the show and what have you. I'd say that's probably a little bit more even. Still, more will have used their wild card.
Definitely more.
But
more.
Not in the same ratio as, say, the wider general pop, gen pop, as we call it. So where should we start with or without? I feel like an optician there, James. Is it clearer with
So
or
yeah,
without?
what Suj is saying, essentially you've got two immediate paths which land on: do you still have first wild card left, or do you not? So I think for those on the first wild card, it seems fairly straightforward. The first decision to make is: should you wild card now, or should you wild card before game week 16? And again, that's going to be a little bit dependent on your team. For me, I've got quite a strong team going into game week 15. So genuinely, to the point that I could burn a transfer and not particularly give a shit, genuinely. Again, I'm looking at a 1 week punt, and the team, I'm likely leaving like Cole Walker-Peters away to Fulham on the bench, possibly Luke Ayling at home to Burnley on the bench, Mason Greenwood, if he turns up this week, away to Leicester on the bench. That's potentially what I'm looking at. So it depends where you land. If you're in a really bad position for this game week, then you might think, oh, I want to pull the trigger early. Yeah. One of the, I feel like with the fixtures, though, that's probably unlikely that you're in a bad position for this week. Arsenal-Chelsea is the only meeting between, and Leicester United is the only ones meeting of so-called big teams. So if you're landing there in a position where you've got, I don't know, Vardy, Fernandes and Rashford, and you've got, I don't know, say you've got Reece James, who looks like he's going to be out for a while, Ben Chilwell, or Aubameyang, heaven forbid, for some reason, you might think, oh, I don't like the look of this game week. I want a wild card early. Fine. I don't think there's going to be too many people in that position, though. One of the things I keep hearing is the idea that people are already, if you're already on wildcard, don't regret it. You've done it. But I think waiting till the weekend is quite important if you can. There's a number of reasons behind that. So one of the things I think that's put people into the fear of doing it early is they don't want to be doing their wildcard over a weekend where they're going to be getting blind drunk.
True.
And I get that. What I would recommend that most people do now is try and make the decision before the weekend comes round of what your ideal team is going to be. And try and be strict to it. There will be one or two things where your mind changes. But I think the benefits of waiting far outweigh doing it now. Injuries is one potential. Suspensions. So I'll give you an example. I don't have a full list in front of me, but one of the players I've got at the moment is Cole Walker-Peters. So he's 4.7, I think now. If he isn't, he's about to be. So I've nicked a little bit of value out of him. But with a double game week of Leicester and Leeds in 19, I'm quite happy to hold on to him. Fixtures afterwards are not too bad for Southampton. Not the best, but they're not the worst. I could bench him against Liverpool in game week 17. Play him against West Ham if I want to in game week 16. He's cheap enough that he kind of fits the tin. One of the things I'm nervous about with a player like that, of course, is he's on 3 yellow cards.
Right.
So I need to make a decision. Now, Cole Walker-Peters has been on 3 yellow cards, I think, since around about game week 6. So he individually has actually gone nearly 8-9 game weeks or so without a yellow card. And he might be consciously aware of it now. But there's certain fixtures coming up between now and 19, i.e. the fact they play against Liverpool, which could make me a bit nervous that he even gets the 4th yellow. Because what you don't want is to carry a player like that in and he gets booked in the first game of the double and misses the second. That's a nightmare. Then all I've got is Cole Walker-Peters away to Leicester. That doesn't sound so great.
No,
so you need to be conscious of that sort of thing. So waiting that extra week gives you a little bit more information on someone like that. Should Cole Walker-Peters come through the Fulham game and not get booked, I'm now looking at a position where he'd need to get booked 2 in 3 games for him to miss one of the doubles, for example.
Right.
And I fancy my chances are a lot better. If Cole Walker-Peters gets booked at Fulham, he ain't going to be in my wild card. That makes sense. It's too much of a risk.
Of course.
So there's that to learn. There's also injuries. The other thing is the immediate impact of game week 16, because of the small distance of games between 15 and 16. There were a number of teams who were obviously playing 2 games in 3 days, which is a bit of a mare. So to give you an example, and this will be a high profile one, but I would say right now, in my opinion, if you've got Jamie Vardy, he won't play at Crystal Palace next week in game week 16. There's a couple of reasons behind that as an example. So they've got Manchester United on Saturday, big game. Now, we know Vardy has this long-standing hip injury, which is a problem. We saw him limp off in the game yesterday with that against Tottenham. So he's yellow flagged at the moment. My bet is this happened after they played Manchester City in game week 3.
Yeah.
And I think he was fine for the next game. He'll probably be fine for Manchester United. Is he, at his age, going to recover to play Crystal Palace 50 hours later? Probably not. And you will know, Suj, as a West Ham fan, what did Brendan Rodgers do when this happened last year? He basically took a reserve team to West Ham, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. They did beat us, I'm sure.
So,
quite comfortably as well, I might add.
The point is, the bigger picture is, there's certain players who might get left out in 15. You think, okay, they've had their break now. So a different example might be Manchester City, who admittedly don't play in a double. But if you're planning because you're going towards game week 18 rather than 19, which is an alternative strategy idea, you might want a free hit in 19, for example. And I get that. That's okay. City have got Newcastle on the Saturday, Everton away on the Monday. Again, 24-hour turnaround. They play 8 o'clock both days. So I would think, I mean, guessing Guardiola teams is bad at the best of times, right? But they've got 2 games in 3 days. I would think he prioritises the Everton fixture as the tougher one and rests quite a few players against Newcastle. Now, if you wait to wildcard before 16, you've now got that information of who's likelier to play the Everton game than not. So that's another good reason to really wait. We're underestimating the impact of 15 to wildcarders. So if you haven't pulled the trigger and you're thinking, should I do it now? Genuinely, I'd wait. I'd wait till the deadline goes from 16. Yeah. And look, you're going to sit there and watch a lot of football on the 27th. Come on. Yeah, I believe you. Just do it on the 27th.
Yeah, it is hard just because obviously for a lot of people, they're like, well, hang on, this is going to end at 9 o'clock on Sunday night. Yeah. And then I've got what's the deadline on the Monday? Just checking here.
Podcast
1:30.
Podcast out on midnight on Sunday night. In case you was wondering, by the way,
it's good to give that a little plug. James and I have already scheduled in Sunday night. Once the match is over, who is the Sunday night game? It's Wolves Spurs, isn't it?
Yeah.
As soon as Spurs is done,
literally immediately after Spurs, this could be.
We will be recording a pod. Yeah, especially. Wolves beat you. I can't wait.
Yeah, great. I'd anticipate that at the moment, by the way.
We're playing Brighton earlier in the day. But yeah, so that's going to be out for people. So if you wake up on the Monday morning, the 28th, it's a bank holiday.
Just stay up till midnight. You just told me. Those are wildcarding early. You're going to be drinking for 48 hours.
Yeah.
Just put the podcast on with your family and my swearing at midnight. Don't be watching Royal Family and all that stuff.
Our biggest fan base is in Ghana, so it won't even be in the morning. It won't be midnight.
So
it'll be something else. We'll have content for you. And we'll both be in that boat. Like, I haven't pulled the trigger on my wildcard. James hasn't. So that pod, whilst we'll
be on it as well, yeah.
Will be very interesting for people.
So once decided to play the wildcard, and the recommendation is to do it before 16 rather than before 15. You've then got different routes. So one is the route that I think you and I are almost definitely going to take, Suj, which is free hit 18 and
Correct.
Bench boost 19. The alternative is, there's a lot of people who've got a lot of value tied up in certain players, like Harry Kane, for example, Heung-min Son, Jack Grealish, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who all play in 18. And I think that's one of a value is a big reason here why a lot of people want to hold on to the idea of targeting teams in 18 rather than 19. My opinion is that the group of teams in 19 is stronger than the group of teams in 18. City, I don't really want too much other than maybe a defensive one and KDB at the moment. Everton, I don't want much other than Calvert-Lewin. Villa, I don't want much bar Jack Grealish. And Spurs, I don't really want too much of, but I certainly accept that in Spurs' case, the run of fixtures from 16 to 19 is really good. And there's every chance I will wildcard with Son and Kane and sell them in 19, quite possibly. Or, in the worst case scenario, keep them for the single game week fixture away to Sheffield United. That's a decision for down the road. The reason I think a lot of, like I said, value is making a lot of people still want to target game week 18. And the idea then, of course, would be to free hit in 19. Or you don't. You don't do anything. You take that chance that game week 26, or the very, very unlikely idea that game week 37 might be bigger game weeks. I'd be amazed if 37 is big, by the way. But I think we might have some fixtures in there that we don't expect. You take the chance that 26 is going to be bigger, and you wildcard potentially in your second wildcard in game week 25 to prep for that.
Yes.
So I think that's quite straightforward. For those who don't have the first wild card, the maneuver is a lot more difficult. And I think, as you already alluded to, Suj, the first thing to say is this is so team dependent. To say, is it right for me to do this, or is it right for me to do that? I saw one person earlier who literally had like treble Villa, treble Spurs, double City, and Calvert-Lewin, and I'm thinking, you've nearly got the 18 free hit.
Covered.
I understand why you don't want to use that.
Use a free hit. Yeah,
I get that completely.
Yeah.
So it really is team dependent to what everybody has and how you work through. I think the number one question to come out of it is, should you, if you don't have your first wild card, use the second wild card in game week 17 to then go free hit, bench boost, or vice versa? My opinion, and it's only my opinion, is probably not.
I have to agree with you there, James. I just think it's such a long run of the season.
That's the biggest reason. It's so long.
It. And popular or unpopular opinion, I always find that these things are overhyped. I think the fear of missing out in game week 18 and 19 on what could be a monster haul is usually overhyped. Just look at this game week that's just gone, right? The first match of the game week was you'd cleaned up in that, and a lot of people did 35, 40 points.
I jumped about 1 million points for that Liverpool game. That was despite taking the captaincy of Salah.
And at that point, as just the Robertson owner, I'm thinking, bloody hell, this is going to be a difficult game week. I could end up falling really far behind. Did I? No, not really. Like the gap, as much as I didn't have the best game week, it just never ends up being
you caught up. You had Bruno Fernandes and stuff, right?
Exactly. So it just never ends up being as big a deal as you sometimes worry about it could be before. So that's why I'm also in the mindset of don't think about burning the wild card early. Now, if you have a lot of injuries, COVID players, all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's a long time to go without having that second wild card.
I think it's too long, and I think you're now probably we're coming into game week 14 next. Mm-hmm. You've got a few weeks to prepare. Now, there's a couple of different routes that you can take here. One is you target those players playing in 18, you use the free hit in 19. The other way is you can obviously target players in 19, you free hit in 18. Or the other way to do it, which I think a lot of people might end up doing here, is just go, I'm going to wing it.
Yeah.
And winging it is okay to say, because there are a lot of teams that are playing in 18 who have good single game week fixtures in 19.
Correct.
Grealish against Tottenham and Everton. It's not the worst. Wolves have Everton at home in 18, West Brom at home in 19. Tottenham have Villa away, Sheffield United away. City have Brighton at home, Palace at home. Arsenal, Crystal Palace at home, Newcastle at home. 2 home
fixtures.
There are a lot of single game week players that could outscore double game week players in 19. It's absolutely quite conceivable. One of the things I would warn on the idea, though, in terms of, I'm going to carry through is, a lot of the good assets that you want to carry you through are expensive. So if you want to, listen, we laugh at Aubameyang now, right? But if he goes off at Brighton and West Brom in 16, 17, he'd be in everyone's free hit team in 18, for example. And he'd be a lot of people's captain, by the way. City. The problem with City, of course, is the rotation a little bit. But I'll come back to why that might not be such a problem before we finish. So there are players you can carry through. Of course you can. If Spurs go off at Sheffield United and win 3 or 4-0, which I'd say is very unlikely, by the way, because Sheffield United will be dying for their life no matter what situation they're in, then comfortably could outscore a Bruno Fernandes, who one of his double games is Liverpool, for example. What I would say is the one caution is, when you get to 19, if you're thinking, I'll carry through, you will particularly, I think, with Mohamed Salah, have a serious urge to want to find a way to get there.
Right.
That's the one thing. Because you're not you could sit there with De Bruyne, Son, Aubameyang, Kane, for example. You will want to stick the armband on a Salah or a Jamie Vardy or Bruno Fernandes, for example. So if you're winging it through, you just have to accept that. I think that you're going to want to move. And do you know what? in terms of the gain, if you want to go from 18 to 19 and then take a few hits, fine. If you want to go from 17 and 18 to take a few hits, fine. Don't have a major problem for that. I would prioritize, if you're going to do that for attacking players rather than defensive players. 18, which is obviously the 10 teams playing. I mean, if you've got the players that I've just mentioned, I wouldn't worry too much about the rest. You can come through there 5, 6, and whether you have a good or bad week, it might come down to literally you captain De Bruyne over Kane. De Bruyne gets 2 goals and assist, and Kane blanks, and you'll cover everyone.
Yeah.
Quite conceivably. So I think for those who don't have the second wild card, generally speaking, probably wait. Are you going to get the best benefit of a bench boost? You might do, but you're unlikely to. But you can probably set yourself better up across the other game weeks and then be ready to act for game week 26. So you could say, okay, you won't get as big a bench boost, for example, but you can be in a position in game week 25 to react to it. Yeah. Another time maybe to use the second wild card is if you start heading towards the teams that play in game week 29 with the single game week, where we know on average there'll be 4 or 5 fixtures, maybe 6, somewhere in between. That number is the most likely. 5 is average how it works out. Wildcard in game week 30 to get away from that. Yep. And you might find that you're loading up on a load of players who's still got a game week to be rearranged where you don't know where it will be, like Villa Newcastle, for example, which if suddenly Villa aren't in the FA Cup semi-finals and that drops into the free game week of 32, they'll have a double there where nearly everybody else has a single fixture, for example. So there aren't rights and wrongs. A lot of this is going to be very, very reactive. I know in terms of my thinking at the moment, I would probably say my thinking is to use the second wild card in game week 30. But I'm also aware by which point I'll know what game week 29 is going to look like. And if there's only 3 fixtures, for example, and they're all absolutely shit, it's Brighton, Newcastle, and the other ones I mentioned, then I'll 4 or 5 players. I don't care. Yeah, make sure I've got whoever the best captaincy option is, and then just go through. So in terms of when will I play my second wild card? Right now, I couldn't tell you. I'd say it's most likely to be either, possibly even on the day, game week 26. To just go, if I haven't got the bench boost, I could just go in on the day, right? It doesn't particularly matter.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing is it would deny me triple captain if I wanted to use it that week. But if I'm not going to use that week, I can just go on the day. Or like I said, game week 30 to come off of any issues, game week 29. I like the game week 30 idea because A, it gets rid of probably players that I didn't want. And B, then that's a nice stretch of 9 game weeks for the home run to have a clear indication of how it's going to look, for example. So that's my current thinking. I think second wild card, you've got 6 options in my opinion. 17 to cover the immediate. 19, which could mean that's another idea. It acts as almost like a free hit. And then you still keep the free hit for another problem. If you like all the teams that are playing in 19, for example, and you don't want to use the bench boost there, and you think, okay, this will carry me, and I can use the free hit to deal with the next problem, be it 26, 29. That's another option. Game week 20, if you don't like what you've got after the double, come straight off it. 25 before the potential double, 26 on the double, or 30 to escape problems. Those are the most likely times for your second wild card, in my opinion.
There we go. I think that's a fair rundown, James. I think everybody has got enough food for thought just before Christmas to start mulling around. There's still 2 fixtures left in the current game week 14, followed by 10 fixtures in game week 15 as well before we get to this kind of period. So it's important to keep your eyes and ears on the ground in terms of injuries and stuff. I didn't see the Aubameyang being missing, for example, came out of nowhere and all that kind of
Shame.
stuff. Yeah.
One key point on 19 for bench boost, and another reason why I think it is the best, in my opinion. How many times do we go into a double game week and think, oh, I hope he plays twice? Yeah. Invariably, you can't. How often can you get to 15 players who play twice?
Yeah, I mean, if you get 25 fixtures out of 30 potential fixtures, take it and run. Just look at your
I would want this time, and admittedly, there's things that can happen in between the game week coming round, so to plug holes. But I would I would want from the 30 players, I would want 29 fixtures, and I'll explain why. I think from this point of view, rotation, not so much of a problem. Everybody who plays their first fixture in game week 19 has just had the midweek off.
Yeah.
Everybody of the 10 teams that double. After obviously the midweek fixture afterwards is FA Cup fourth round. Now, I think FA Cup is going to throw up some madness results this year because I think a lot of teams are just going to go, this is too much. You got to remember, there's a number of Premier League midweeks we've got in January, which are full Premier League fixture lists, right? The FA Cup fourth round, the FA Cup third round are kind of the breathers to give a lot of these players breaks. So the FA Cup fourth round after 19, I think it's highly likely that a lot of the players will play twice in the double. The other clincher for me personally is there are 3 teams who I like the assets from, who are cheap, who I can have in the double game week. And those are Leeds, Southampton and West Ham. And neither of them come into awful periods afterwards. West Ham land on Crystal Palace. Okay, it's Liverpool afterwards. I can bench them. Then it's Villa and Fulham. That's okay. Leeds land on Newcastle straight after the double. They've got a good 16 fixture at West Brom, for example. Southampton land on Arsenal Villa at home. Newcastle is the fourth of those fixtures. United away. The way Southampton play, I'm not sure the fixtures matter too much at the moment. We need to start considering them as a good side. So I think that's the clincher for me. I think the other tip I'd give goalkeepers wise, I'd go cheap. There's good rotations to be found between Areola, Johnston, Meslier and McCarthy, who are all currently 4.6 or under. Get 2. If you've got a week where you think, I don't know what to do, drag one down to a 3.9, which there will be one by that point, I'm pretty sure, if there's not already. So I think in terms of actually getting the maximum of close to 30 players from this double, a lot more likely than we normally would in a normal 34 or 37 game week double, for example.
Interesting. I hope everybody's enjoyed that rundown on the upcoming 4 or 5 game weeks and in terms of what you can do with and without your chips. Do obviously ask any questions on Twitter, interact with us as much as you can over there at Planet FPL Pod at Suj James. I can't promise we will help or we'll have the answers to your questions, but you never know, it might be fun trying. As always, if you need additional FPL content, you can head over to patreon.com/Planet FPL. We're producing tons of additional content and we'll be keeping everybody busy through the Christmas break as well. Pods every day, almost without fail. Anything else to add, James?
Just to say, like, don't be told that there's right or wrong. There'll be a lot of people saying...
There just isn't, is there?
There'll be a lot of people saying you can't do it like that or you have to do it like this. Like, genuinely, I can't reiterate enough that your own personal circumstance is probably going to determine where you go. And it's okay to not bench boost in 19 or not use a chip at all in 18, 19, if that's what you think is best. Our job is just to simply say, these are the possibilities. This is what could happen. This is what we're doing. What you do is up to you.
Indeed. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all of your support. Really important that you stay safe and enjoy this Christmas break in at home and whatever else you are. And keep your ears peeled for our content. Ciao for now.
Game week 14 review tomorrow. Good luck, everyone. Cue music, please, man child.